In this video, we will go into more detail on how to read a statute on Westlaw. I apologize for exceeding my self-imposed 10-minute limit. I was able to edit this from 20 minutes down to less than 15. So here we are back at 459.5 in the California Penal Code. I could easily spend an hour thoroughly demonstrating everything on this page to you, but I only have 10 minutes, so I will have to go fast and I will have to skip quite a few things. I recommend you come to the library and practice. I promise you can't hurt anything. The worst thing that can happen is you would accidentally send hundreds of pages to the printer. But if you're here, we charge for printing, and so you would have to stop and enter a password to do that, so you don't need to worry about it. I'm going to start by demonstrating what all these do for you over here, and then we'll talk about the tabs, and that's probably all I can do in 10 minutes. So first you see Go To. Now if this were a very long code section, Go To would be really helpful because here's what it does. It gives you a list of every paragraph in the code section. As you can see, this one is very short and it has only 2 sections or 2 paragraphs. Takes me right to paragraph B. But it could be very helpful if you were looking at a code that goes on for multiple pages and for many paragraphs. This, with the green arrows, is what makes it possible for you to browse through the code. So it's very similar to just turning the page. If you click the right facing arrow, you will go forward 1 section number. So by clicking that, now I'm on section 460. By clicking the left facing arrow, you go back 1 section. And so now I'm back to 459.5. This is very helpful when there's a number of sections in a row that are of interest to you, or if you want to see what is in the vicinity, because often related sections are close together. Now this is a table of contents, so this also lets you browse through the code, but it does on a much more macro level than the 1 section at a time over here. So by clicking table of contents, I bring up the entire table of contents of the code, basically, because up here it's West California codes. If I were to click that, it would give me a list of every code in the California codes. If I click this, it would take me back to the beginning of the penal code and list all the parts. By clicking part 1, it takes me back to part 1 and it lists all the titles. By clicking title 13, it would take me back to the beginning of title 13 and list all the sections that are in it. And so this makes it easy for me to move around within the code very easily. The magnifying glass here allows you to search for a particular word or phrase. So if I search for the word burglary, it then will look through this section for everywhere where the word burglary appears and highlight it in green. But look, if I keep scrolling, it also shows me the research references and the relevant notes of decision. The little font display options here, this allows me to change the size of the font and which font we're using and how wide it is. This can be very helpful if you have limited vision and you need to make the font larger. I don't think I need to demonstrate that. This allows you to copy the citation, and I'm not sure what use this would be to you, especially if you're using a computer here in the library instead of your own computer. But it basically moves it to your clipboard and then you can copy it, cut and paste it into whatever document you're doing. Now here's the most important thing, and that's the delivery menu. You see, you can email, you can print, and you can download. Now it happens to show the envelope here because the last thing I did was email something. But if the last thing I had done was print, instead of the envelope, it would show the little printer icon. And if the last thing I had done is download, it would show the little download icon. But each one of these has a lot of options available to it. So if I wanted to email this, first it would ask me to enter an email address. I could attach a note to it, maybe to remind if I'm sending it to myself, to remind myself of why. Or if you're sending it to someone else, you can say something. You can pick the format you want it in. You might want to use Microsoft Word. You might want to use the generic word processor format. You might want PDF, and you might want WordPerfect. But if you're just wanting a copy, I suggest go with the PDF. You can change the layout and limits. For example, links are always shown in blue ink, and sometimes that doesn't work too well with the printer. You know your own printer better than I do, but I will usually change that to black if I'm going to print. I can adjust the font size here, and here you can say what you want to include. And if you're just wanting a copy of the section language, I would be sure to click statutory text only, because you're going to get a lot more material and it'll take more pages. I always unclick cover page because it's just a wasted piece of paper. Now, if you want to include a lot more, that is a list of the citing references and any of these things down here, the notes of decisions, context and analysis, and so forth, you can click these, but let me warn you, that's where you can accidentally send hundreds of pages to the printer. So I would not do that. A list might not be too bad. It may only be 10 or 12 citations sent to you, or it may only be a short list. Right here it tells you how many there are. 500 citing references is going to take a lot of pages. So I always just unclick those. If I'm going to print it, I get a lot of the same options. I can turn off the blue for the links. I can say I only want the statutory text. I can eliminate the cover page and so forth. And again, make sure I'm not sending a lot of stuff to the printer that I don't actually need printed. And for the download, same thing, only it gives you a choice of format and then layout, limits, and content to append. Now, if you are downloading or emailing to yourself, you may want all that extra stuff. And since emailing it to yourself or downloading it doesn't cost you anything, by all means, go ahead and download a list of 500 citing references. Then you can go through them on your home computer at your leisure. But I would be careful if I was printing them. This final icon right here allows you to go into full screen mode, and I have no idea why anyone would want to do that, but that's how you do it. Okay, so now we'll look at the tabs. There are 5 tabs. The first one, the Document tab, is pretty self-explanatory. The third one, the History tab, we're not going to look at. So we're going to concentrate primarily on notes of decisions and citing references, and then a quick look at context and analysis. Now you remember the notes of decisions from the print version, and that's all this is. You remember that there might be a small index to the notes of decisions, and that is over here. So you could go directly to the note that you're interested in, or you could go into the tab. So to go into the tab, I just click on it, and at the top I have that index again. If for any reason you don't get the numbers that are associated with the note sections, that probably means that you have the hierarchical view showing. And this is what the hierarchical view looks like. Switch to the list view, and I wish they listed them in numerical order, but for some reason they list them in alphabetical order. And so here are your note numbers. So if you know it's note 10, for example, there it is. That's the note number. You can go right to it. Here are the list of the notes, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom for a second. And so there are no, if there were more pages, you would see a list of page numbers down here, but there are no more page numbers. So everything is on this one page. If I was interested, say, in the sufficiency of evidence, I could click on note 7. It would take me straight to note 7, where there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes. And then each note, of course, gives you a cite and a topic and key number and so forth, and I could click on that and I could go take a quick look at the case. Now, citing references, you'll see the pop-up menu. I could go directly to the section of citing references I'm interested in, but I prefer to actually go into the tab itself. And over here's that list of sections, citing references. One of the things I want you to notice, cases. There's 673 cases. but there's only 107 notes of decisions. Shouldn't those numbers be a little closer together? Well, the main thing is notes of decisions contains only published cases. So there's probably hundreds of unpublished opinions in the citing references. And remember, in California, you cannot cite unpublished opinions. Now you can click on whatever section you're interested in. I'm just going to look at two. Go start with cases, and when I pick cases, you'll see over here on the left, I get a variety of filters I can use. This lets me reduce a large number of case notes. In this case, there's 673, and I don't want to look through 673. I can use the filters to narrow down to what I'm interested in. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom by saying I only want to see reported cases. Now notice it did not immediately eliminate unreported cases, and that's because I have to apply filters up here because I'm using multiple filters. Depending on how the settings are set when you use it, you may have to change it to multiple filters. If you don't change it, then every time you make a change to the filters on the left, then the results will change. And you may like to do it that way. Let's say I don't care about whether it's referenced in the notes of decisions, but I do want to make sure I don't want to look at 22 federal cases. I only want to look at cases from California. Everywhere you see a little plus, that means if you click on the plus, you can open it further. So I only want California Supreme Court cases, and that's what Cal means. And let's say I only want the Cal App 4th District cases. So I've narrowed it down to 11 and 263 right there, and that's a lot better. But let's say I also want to limit it by date. Now I have choices, some presets here, or I can say all dates after a certain date, or I can say a specific date. I can set a range. I'm going to say all dates after, and I'm just going to say 1999. Continue. Now I've got my filters, and I'm going to apply them. And as you can see now, I have 20 on this page, and then there's 3 pages. So if I want to go see the next group, I'd have to click the right facing arrow, and then the last group, the right facing arrow again. Now let's say you want to look at secondary sources. Go in here, there's 54 total, and I have a different selection of filters over here. I can do a search within the results. I can go by date, but let's say I'm interested in a publication date, and I'm showing you this one because this was one my students used to struggle with. This is actually a fairly short list of publications, so it's not too bad. Sometimes it's much longer. So let's say I'm only interested in a law review article from Pepperdine Law School. Continue. Apply filters. And there's the one article that was published by Pepperdine Law School's Law Review that cited this section of the code for some reason. Now I can undo the filters and go back to the full list. Now let's go to context and analysis. This is probably where you'll want to start if you're a beginner and you're looking for secondary sources to explain something to you. You'll probably want to start here because it's a much more limited set, and it's also focusing on resources that will help a beginner like yourself, say a legal encyclopedia, ALR, a few law review articles, and then some practice materials down here. So it'd be much simpler to get to some easy explanatory material. And you'll notice there's no filters. All you can do is limit it to a particular type. I could limit it to just encyclopedias. It'll just take me straight to the encyclopedias. And that's all there is to it. Our next video will be about finding a statute on Westlaw using a citation.